Welcome to Starbound. If you're tired of AI-generated slop and want real, human storytelling, please subscribe to this channel. My name's Carol. Let's get into the story.
The surest cure for terminal boredom is to find someone who looks like they could uninvent you with a stray thought and poke them with a metaphorical stick. My chosen specimen was a masterpiece of galactic-level angst, a sculpted deity of brooding who had claimed the corner booth of the glitching post as his personal temple of solitude. He tried so hard to be inconspicuous, wrapped in simple, dark fabrics that likely cost more than the orbital condo my mother and I called home. But you can't hide a spine that rigid, or a jaw that looked engineered to fracture opposing arguments. His eyes, the color of cooling starlight, kept flicking to the cafe door, a subtle clenching at the corner of his mouth betraying his frustration. He was waiting, and his party was late. It felt like a crime against the arts to let that much prime, moody real estate go to waste. I was about to vandalize it with a spray can of pure, unadulterated me. "You're doing it all wrong," I announced, sliding into the booth opposite him. The worn synth leather sighed under my weight. He blinked, his intense focus shattering like cheap plasteel. The sheer, uncut surprise in his star silver eyes was more satisfying than cracking the vending machine's payment system for a free bag of synth puffs. "I beg your pardon?" His voice was a low, resonant thrum, the sound a planet killer engine makes just before it tears a hole in reality. "The brooding," I clarified, leaning forward and propping my chin on my hands. "It's a classic amateur mistake. You're aiming for the tortured soul burdened by a dark past aesthetic, correct? A sort of cosmic caped crusader." He simply stared, his expression a perfect, unreadable slate. It was like trying to get a reaction from a block of primordial granite. "See, your posture is too perfect," I continued, gesturing with a hand that had synth puff dust on the knuckles. "It broadcasts, 'I own a personal trainer and a ridiculously expensive ergonomic throne.' You need a hint of slouch. Not too much, we aren't going for depressed data clerk, but just enough to suggest the gravitational pull of 1,000 star systems rests squarely on your shoulders. And the door watching. Far too obvious. It screams impatience. You need to gaze into the middle distance. Perhaps at that flickering neon sign, advertising Greb's Grog, as if you're haunted by the spectral images of your fallen comrades." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable for him. "Do you have any fallen comrades?" He finally spoke, his voice dangerously smooth, each word polished to a lethal sheen. "My comrades are, for the moment, quite vertical." "Well, there's your problem. No tragic backstory." I shook my head, my disappointment a carefully crafted performance. "Look, I'm Rory, and you have just been elevated to my people to inconvenience today list. Congratulations! It's very exclusive." A muscle in his jaw jumped. Victory. "I am waiting for someone," he said, the statement a dismissal encased in ice. "I know. They're late. It's undermining your whole mysterious stranger vibe. Makes you look needy." I snagged a nutrient stick from the table's dispenser and snapped it in half with a sharp crack. "So, Cosmic Crusader, what brings you to this fine establishment? The glitching post isn't the usual haunt for men who look like they gargle liquefied nebulae for breakfast." He was about to deliver what I was certain would be a gloriously condescending retort when the cafe door hissed open again. This time it wasn't some twitchy synthale addict or a docking crew on their 20-minute break. It was my own, personal, 5'7" harbinger of doom. My mother. Alani Kahlo doesn't walk into a room, she conquers it. The ambient chatter of the glitching post dropped a few decibels, the way it does when an apex predator walks into a petting zoo. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, and with an unnerving ability to see right through flimsy excuses and Durasteel bulkheads, scanned the grimy cafe and landed on me. The temperature around our booth seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ulrich, my cosmic crusader, went completely, utterly still, a statue carved from sudden caution. "Rory Abigail Kahlo," my mother said, her voice a low, controlled growl that promised a grounding so severe my future children would be born with ankle monitors. "What did I tell you about wandering off to the lower decks?" "That it's a fantastic opportunity for personal growth and cross-cultural exchange," I offered, my smile wide and utterly unconvincing. Her glare could have ignited methane in the station's atmosphere. She stalked toward our booth, every line of her body radiating an energy field that screamed, "Do not poke the bear," an effect more potent than any personal shield generator. She wore her usual off-duty mechanic's jumpsuit, stained with hydraulic fluid and a deep-seated contempt for authority. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, practical knot, and a network of fine scars mapped her knuckles. A thin, white line sliced through one eyebrow, a souvenir from her former life as a mercenary combat engineer. She was the most terrifying and beautiful thing in this quadrant of the galaxy, and she was about to end me. Then, her gaze shifted from me to the man I was harassing. She took in his quiet intensity, the subtle expense of his simple clothes, the way he held himself like the center of gravity in any room he occupied. Her expression hardened from maternal fury into something else entirely. Pure, unadulterated suspicion, the kind she usually reserved for engines that made a funny noise just before they exploded. The silver-eyed man, for his part, was staring at my mother. And I mean staring. It wasn't the way most men looked at her with that familiar cocktail of fear and lust. This was different. He watched her with a kind of stunned, silent fascination, as if he'd just witnessed a new law of physics spontaneously come into being. The air between them crackled, a sudden, sharp scent of superheated ceramic that had nothing to do with my impending punishment. He'd been annoyed by me, but he was utterly captivated by her. It was the most interesting thing that had happened all week. "I can explain," I began, hoping to head off the inevitable court-martial. "You'll explain it on the way back to our quarters, where you will forfeit all network privileges until the next star in this system collapses into a black hole," she clipped, her hand shooting out to grab my arm. That's when two new figures appeared, blocking the exit. They weren't station security. They were big, broad, and clad in matte black armor that seemed to drink the neon light of the cafe, leaving nothing behind. Kalian military grade, with the Ascendancy insignias meticulously scrubbed off. That was never a good sign. The two armored thugs moved with a chilling purpose, planting themselves by the door like monoliths of bad news. Their helmeted heads swiveled, their optical sensors glowing a dull, predatory red as they scanned the room. They weren't here for a brawl. They were here to confirm a target. Their sweeping gaze dismissed the other patrons, dock workers, low-level data pushers, off-duty pilots, and locked onto our booth, onto Ulrich. I saw one of them subtly tap a device on his wrist, a silent ping sent to whatever master held their leash. Their mission had been simple: lay eyes on the target. But then we showed up, a chaotic, human variable. "Excuse us," one of them grunted, his voice a distorted, metallic rasp from his helmet's external speaker. He and his partner moved, not toward Ulrich, but to box us in. They had clearly misinterpreted my mother's arrival, her sheer force of nature presence, as some kind of elite backup. Their simple recon mission had just gone loud. The agent reached out to grab me, his logic flawless and fatal. Take the leverage. It was a mistake he'd have the rest of his very short, very painful life to regret. The agent's gauntleted fingers closed on my shoulder. For a split second, I felt a sharp, cold point of pressure against my collar, a sensation I barely registered in the sudden roaring spike of adrenaline. Before Ulrich could react with whatever restrained, regal power he possessed, my mother moved. It was a chain reaction of brutal physics. Her hand clamped down on the agent's wrist, like a magnetic vice. In one liquid motion, she used his forward momentum against him, twisting his arm and stepping into his space. A wet, sickening crack echoed in the suddenly silent cafe as his elbow hyperextended in a direction elbows are not designed to go. He screamed, a muffled, electronic shriek of agony. She didn't pause. She pivoted, her other hand snatching a heavy ceramic synthale mug from our table. The second agent was just bringing his plasma pistol up. He was too slow. My mother swung the mug in a vicious arc, smashing it directly into his helmet's visor. The armored plasteel didn't just crack, it exploded inward in a shower of sharp, glittering fragments. He staggered back, a choked gurgle escaping his throat as he clawed at his ruined face. Ulrich stared, his silver eyes wide with something I couldn't quite decipher. Shock, yes, but also a healthy dose of pure, unadulterated awe. He had been ready to fight like a king with grace and brutality. My mom had just fought like a cornered Wolverine with a degree in demolition. The cafe detonated. Patrons screamed and scrambled for cover, tables flipping over, spilling drinks and half-eaten nutrient bars across the grimy floor. The two agents, tough as they were, recovered with grunts of pain. The one with the broken arm drew his pistol with his good hand. The one with the shattered visor clawed it from his head, revealing a face full of blood and incandescent rage. This time Ulrich acted. He moved with a speed that seemed to defy the laws of biology for someone so large and regal. He surged from the booth, a blur of dark fabric. He didn't disarm the first agent. He simply slammed the man's wrist against the edge of a nearby table. The pistol clattered to the floor. Then he spun, positioning his body between us and the second gunman, a living shield. He grabbed my mother's arm. "This way," he barked. His voice no longer a smooth purr, but a sharp, commanding crackle of authority. For a split second, my mother bristled, ready to shake him off. Then, a bolt of crimson plasma seared the air where my head had just been, melting a bubbling black crater in the wall. She didn't pull away. "Lead on, Your Majesty," she gritted, her voice dripping with enough sarcasm to corrode the hull of a battleship. He didn't seem to notice. He was already pulling us through the chaos, toward the kitchen swinging doors. The back alleys of Port Ambit are a maze of hissing steam vents, slick, filth-coated walkways, and the impressive, low-frequency hum of overworked life support systems. The air tasted of ozone and stale protein. Blaster fire ricocheted behind us, the angry red bolts lighting up the grime in strobing flashes. My supposed cosmic crusader wasn't just running blindly. He was executing a plan. He took a sharp left down a service corridor, then a right into a maintenance shaft, never hesitating. He'd studied the schematics of this place. "So, you come here often?" I panted, my boots slipping on a patch of iridescent slime. "Not by choice." He shot back over his shoulder. My mother was silent, her face a hard mask of concentration, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. She ran with an engineer's gait, all economy of motion, her feet finding purchase on the slick floor where I was struggling to stay upright. Ulrich skidded to a halt before an unmarked service door, slapped a panel beside it, and it hissed open into a private, sound-dampened docking bay. Inside, a ship that looked like a high-end courier vessel sat humming quietly, its boarding ramp already lowered. Its hull was a mosaic of interlocking, non-Euclidean shapes, forged from a material so black it seemed to drink the light, a patch of absolute nothingness against the bay's sterile lighting. It was shaped like a raptor's talon, and it screamed, "I'm carrying something more important than your entire planet." We scrambled up the ramp, and it sealed behind us with a solid, definitive thud. The sudden silence was deafening after the chaos of the chase. We were safe. For now. The ship's interior was a jarring contrast to its aggressive exterior. It wasn't just a cockpit. It was a miniature command center that masqueraded as a lounge. Polished chrome gleamed under soft, indirect lighting. The chairs were more like command thrones, upholstered in a rich, dark material that felt like woven silk and cool leather. Silent, glowing consoles were embedded seamlessly into the bulkheads, their displays showing elegant, flowing lines of Kalian script. This wasn't a courier's ship. This was a king's chariot. Ulrich leaned against one of the consoles, breathing heavily. A thin trickle of blood ran from a graze on his cheek where a plasma bolt had come a little too close. He looked at us, his silver eyes holding a mixture of gratitude, frustration, and a dawning sense of resignation. The jig was up, and he knew it. With a weary sigh and a wave of his hand, the ship's interior lighting shifted. Holographic emblems, golden sunbursts radiating intricate geometric lines of power, flared to life on the walls and consoles. The symbol of the Kalian ascendancy, the personal sigil of the Emperor himself. My apologies for the abrupt introduction, he said, his voice laced with an irony so dry it could start a fire. I am Emperor Ulrich. I couldn't help it. I pumped my fist in the air. Called it! Cosmic Crusader is ridiculously rich. I knew it. My mother's expression, however, did something far more dramatic. It shifted from guarded suspicion to a cold, hard fury that could freeze a star mid-fusion. She looked at the most powerful man in the galaxy with the incandescent rage of a mother whose daughter who had just been shot at. You, she seethed, have a lot of explaining to do. Emperor Ulrich, ruler of 10,000 star systems, had the good sense to look properly chastised under my mother's glare. He wiped the blood from his cheek with the back of his hand, his regal composure fraying at the edges like a cheap power cable. You are correct, he said, his voice losing some of its imperial boom and taking on a more human, almost weary tone. This was not how I intended my day to proceed. My daughter was nearly vaporized, my mother stated, her voice dangerously quiet, each word a chip of ice. My day is irrelevant. Start talking. So he did. He explained about the brewing coup, a faction of military traditionalists led by a man named Grand Marshal Dasker, who saw his reforms, his attempts to engage with younger species like humanity, as a dilution of Kalian purity, a fatal weakness. The dead drop at the glitching post was supposed to be the key to stopping it all. My informant, a loyalist admiral, was to deliver a data crystal containing irrefutable proof of Dasker's treason, Ulrich explained, his gaze distant. The names of every conspirator, their plans, their timetable, Dasker's agents arriving at the café before him. He trailed off, the implication hanging heavy in the opulent air. Your presence, and their subsequent attack, confirms my deepest fears. Dasker got to him first. Why you? I asked, my curiosity overriding any sense of self-preservation. Don't you have, like, 1 million spies and soldiers to do this stuff for you? An entire government, even? He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the crushing loneliness behind the silver eyes. The circle of conspirators is wide and deep, and includes members of my own royal guard, the highest echelons of the Admiralty. There was no one I could trust. Every transmission is monitored, every order scrutinized. The only person in the entire ascendancy I knew for certain was not a traitor was myself. The weight of that settled on me. He wasn't just an emperor. He was a prisoner on a throne of paranoia. He turned his full attention back to my mother. Your actions in the cafe, they were remarkable. Your skill is undeniable." He straightened up, the Emperor reasserting himself like a man putting on an ill-fitting coat. "I find myself in your debt, and I am in need of assistance. I will give you anything you desire, wealth beyond your imagining, Kalian citizenship with all its privileges, a private moon if you wish it. Just help me get off this station and to a secure location." It was a grand, imperial offer, a solution befitting a ruler who could move worlds with a word, and it completely, spectacularly missed the mark. My mother actually scoffed, a short, sharp sound of derision. She crossed her arms over her chest, utterly unimpressed. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice an Arctic wind. "You, the most powerful man in the galaxy, screwed up your super secret spy mission, got yourself ambushed, and dragged my daughter and me into a firefight. And now you want to hire us to clean up your mess. We're not getting involved in your imperial pissing contest. Take us back to our quarters. Now." The argument was cut short by a sound that needed no translation in any language. The deep, resonant thump of a magnetic clamp locking onto our hull, followed by a violent shudder that threw us all off balance. Red alert klaxons blared, and the main view screen flickered to life, showing a horrifyingly close view of a Kalian destroyer. It wasn't just a ship. It was a predator, its weapon boards glowing with malevolent energy. Dasker's hunters had found us. "How?" Ulrich breathed, his face paling. "Station command should have challenged them. How did they find this specific ship? This specific bay?" My mother's eyes narrowed. She scanned me from head to toe, her gaze sharp and analytical. "That agent in the cafe," she said, her voice tight. "He grabbed you. Where?" "My shoulder," I said, my own blood running cold as I understood. She reached over and her fingers found it instantly, peeling a tiny metallic disc no bigger than a sequin from the collar of my jacket. The thing blinked with a faint, malevolent red light. "A micro-tracker," Ulrich snarled. "They weren't waiting at the station. They were waiting in high orbit the moment we cleared the station's sensor shadow. They pounced." The fault was mine. The reason a warship was currently trying to peel our ship open like a can was because I decided to go annoy a stranger. "Evasive maneuvers," Ulrich roared at the ship's automated pilot. The sleek vessel banked hard, engines screaming. We were fast, but the destroyer was a warship, built for punishment. It bracketed us with plasma fire. The ship bucked again, more violently this time, as a bolt of energy glanced off our shields and slagged a secondary power conduit on the outer hull. The lights flickered, and a cascade of warning messages scrolled across a console in harsh, elegant Kalian script. "Shields at 40%. Hyperdrive is offline," the ship's calm, synthetic voice announced. "Safety regulations engaged. Catastrophic singularity breach risk detected." The Kalian pilot AI, a glowing orb of light hovering over the main console, spoke with infuriating logic. "Hyperdrive ignition is impossible. To attempt a jump would violate 17 core safety directives." "Your directives are going to get us killed," my mother snarled. She didn't wait for permission. She shoved Ulrich aside, actually shoved the Galactic Emperor out of her way, and vaulted into the pilot's throne. Her hands flew over the consoles, but the hyperdrive activation sequence was locked out, grayed over with a dozen red warning icons. "Override," she commanded. Unable to comply, the AI responded placidly. "Manual override is restricted to certified Kalian naval engineers during level 5 maintenance cycles." "I am a level 10 crisis," my mother yelled back. She scanned the cockpit, her eyes landing on an emergency toolkit magnetically clamped to the bulkhead. She ripped a heavy-duty pry bar from its clips. "What are you doing?" Ulrich demanded, horrified. "Saving our asses with some good old-fashioned percussive maintenance," she grunted. She jammed the pry bar into the seam of a console panel, clearly marked with Kalian symbols that probably translated to extremely forbidden and no user serviceable parts inside. With a screech of tortured metal, the panel ripped open, showering the deck with sparks. Inside was a nest of pristine, perfectly ordered conduits and relays. My mother didn't hesitate. She located a large magnetic valve assembly, glowing a dull red. "That's the chronoton flux gate for the ignition chamber," she muttered to herself. "Safety valves clamped shut." She jammed the sharp end of the pry bar into the mechanism. "That will bypass the entire regulation system," Ulrich protested, his face pale. "It will flood the chamber with raw, unregulated power. It could tear the ship apart." "It's either that, or we get torn apart by them," my mother roared, putting her entire body weight onto the pry bar. With a groaning shriek, the valve forced open. Alarms screamed, rising in pitch to a frantic wail. The whole ship vibrated as raw power, angry and untamed, flooded the drive core. "Hang on," she yelled, slamming her hand down on the now active hyperdrive control. The universe outside the view screen didn't streak into lines of light. It folded. The ship gave a gut-wrenching, bone-jarring lurch, as if it had been kicked by a god. We were thrown against our restraints, and for a terrifying second, the fabric of space-time itself seemed to twist into a nauseating vortex of strange colors. Then, with a final, shuddering groan, we were through. We crashed out of hyperspace with the grace of a brick dropped from orbit. The ship screamed in protest, metal groaning under stresses it was never designed to endure. The view screen showed a field of tumbling, metallic debris orbiting a barren, pockmarked moon, a celestial junkyard, the final resting place of dead ships. We were safe, but we were also stranded. The hyperdrive was well and truly fried. Inside the cramped, dimly lit cockpit, the only sounds were the dying whine of overloaded systems and our own ragged breathing. The space between my mother and Ulrich felt thick enough to choke on, charged with a strange mix of adrenaline and resentment. "You," Ulrich finally managed to say, his voice strained, "are the most reckless, undisciplined, infuriating woman I have ever met." My mother, who was running a diagnostic that was mostly just a long list of red error messages, didn't even look at him. "And you," she shot back, "are the reason I had to hotwire a hyperdrive with a crowbar. Your perfect, orderly systems are beautiful until something goes wrong, and then they curl up and die to protect themselves. I prefer things that are ugly and broken, but still fight." They weren't just arguing about the ship. They were arguing about everything. It was a clash of worldviews, of cultures, of fundamental ways of being. His entire life was built on tradition, meticulous planning, and systems designed to eliminate risk. Her entire life had been about managing risk, embracing chaos, and forcing broken things to work just long enough to survive. He stared at her, his silver eyes glowing in the gloom. "You could have killed us all." "But I didn't," she retorted, finally turning to face him. "And we're still alive. That's the only metric that matters right now." They were inches apart, the space between them charged with something electric. He was breathing heavily. She was defiant. And I swear the air in the cockpit was starting to sizzle. It was the most awkward and intense staring contest I have ever witnessed. From my seat in the back, where I'd been trying to make myself as small as possible, I cleared my throat loudly. "So," I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence, "I'm just gonna try and find the emergency snacks. You two kids play nice, or don't, whatever. Just try not to start a diplomatic incident until I've had some protein. We found temporary shelter inside the cavernous, echoing hull of a derelict freighter, half buried in the moon's regolith. It was a ghost ship, silent and cold, its metal bones groaning in the vacuum. But it hid us from the sky. While we waited for any sign of Drasker's hunters, the emotional armor everyone had been wearing finally started to crack. Ulrich had a nasty gash on his forearm from a piece of shrapnel that had torn loose during our violent hyperspace jump. My mother, ever the pragmatist, had salvaged a med kit from the crippled ship and was patching him up with the steady hands of a field medic. The only light came from a portable glow rod, casting long, dancing shadows across the rusted metal landscape of the freighter's cargo bay. "You are very skilled at this," Ulrich said, his voice quiet as he watched her clean the wound. "You pick things up," my mother replied, her voice neutral. She applied a regenerative bandage, her touch gentle but firm. "When you're the one putting holes in things for a living, you learn how to patch them too, both machinery and people." He was silent for a long moment, watching her face in the dim light. "For 500 years," he began, his voice so low I had to strain to hear it. "Every being I have ever met either fears me or wants something from me. Their strength is a reflection of my own. They are strong because I allow it, or because they serve me." He looked from her hands up to her eyes, and the intensity of his gaze made my stomach do a nervous little flip-flop. "Yours," he said, "is your own. It is forged from hardship and will. I find I don't know what to do with that." It was the most vulnerable I'd ever heard anyone sound, let alone a galactic emperor. For the first time, he didn't seem like a cosmic crusader or a king. He just seemed like a man who was profoundly, crushingly alone. My mother paused in her work, the bandage sealed. In a rare moment of her own vulnerability, her shoulders slumped just a fraction. "My last contract with the Merc Company," she said, her voice soft. "We were pinned down on a gas giant's mining platform. The enemy had cut our only escape route. Our ship's reactor was failing. Everyone looked to the commander for orders." She met Ulrich's gaze. "But the commander looked at me. I wasn't just a grunt, I was the one they sent in to break things or fix them under fire so we could run. You learn to see every piece of tech as a puzzle, or a bomb, sometimes both. There's no room for fear, just the problem and the solution you have to build out of scrap." He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the white scar through her eyebrow. "A crown can feel like a bomb you can't defuse." The air was thick with unspoken things, charged and electric. And then, like a splash of cold water, the distant, angry whine of a Kalian patrol ship's engine sliced through the silence, sweeping across the derelict field. The moment was shattered. They pulled apart, the connection broken, both of them instantly back on alert. The universe, it seemed, wasn't done trying to kill us yet. We needed a new ship, and the only shopping available was at the local scrapyard, a sprawling, chaotic city of broken hulls and scavenged parts, run by a greasy, multi-limbed junker named Greb. Ulrich, still operating on centuries of Imperial programming, strode up to Greb's command hut and attempted to solve the problem the only way he knew how. "I am Emperor Ulrich of the Kalian Ascendancy," he announced, projecting an aura of absolute authority that had probably cowed entire planets into submission. "I am requisitioning one of your long-range vessels for Imperial business. You will be compensated handsomely." Greb, who was busy trying to weld a new leg onto a sputtering loader drone, paused his work. He swiveled 3 of his 4 eye stalks to look Ulrich up and down, taking in his torn, dirty, but still ridiculously fine clothes. Then he let out a gurgling, phlegmy laugh that echoed across the junkyard. Emperor? Right, pal. And I'm the queen of the core worlds, Greb rasped. Look, I don't care if you're the ghost of the first Kalian. No credit, no shit. Now buzz off, I'm busy. While Ulrich was trying, and failing, to argue with a being whose primary motivation was profit, my mother had already found a solution. She'd located a beat-up but structurally sound cargo hauler, a model so old and common it was practically invisible. Its engine cowling was hanging open, a mess of frayed wires and corroded connectors. To her, it was an open invitation. Rory, she whispered to me, her eyes gleaming with a familiar, dangerous light. I need a diversion. Loud one. Over there. She pointed to a teetering stack of unstable, leaking power cells. This was my kind of mission. While my mother got to work with a set of wire strippers she always kept in her boot, I sauntered over to the power cells. My datapad was always in my pocket. It didn't take a master hacker to find the cell's primitive, unencrypted diagnostic frequency. A few lines of malicious code, a command to bypass the safety regulators, and initiate a cascade overload, and I was backing away with a grin. The first cell went up with a deafening bang and a shower of blue sparks. The second followed a second later with a concussive whoomp that rattled our teeth. The rest went up in a chain reaction of loud, smoky, and very satisfying explosions, sending Greb and his cronies scurrying for cover and yelling curses in at least 4 different languages. Now, my mother yelled, and I scrambled up the ramp of the hauler just as she slammed the freshly hot-wired ignition panel. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with the sound of 1,000 angry droids. We blasted off the junk moon, leaving a cloud of dust and a very confused, very angry junk dealer in our wake. Ulrich, strapped into the co-pilot seat, was in a state of stunned, profound admiration. He looked from the receding scrapyard to my mother at the controls. He had just witnessed more practical, decisive results in 10 minutes of pure human chaos than he'd probably seen in a week of Imperial diplomacy. He was learning. Safely in the dead, silent gulf between star systems, we finally risked connecting our new Rust Bucket's comm systems to the Galactic network. We needed to know what we were running from. A news broadcast from the Kalian capital flickered to life on the main screen. Grand Marshal Dasker's face filled the display. He was a stern, imposing Kalian, with a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite, and eyes that held no warmth at all. He looked every bit the ruthless traditionalist Ulrich had described. And so, it is with a heavy heart that the Imperial Council must declare Emperor Ulrich as a traitor to the Ascendancy, Dasker announced, his voice booming with false sorrow and righteous fury. He has abandoned his throne and his duties, consorting with known alien terrorists in a plot against the stability of our great empire. Terrorists? He meant us. A kill on-site bounty has been issued for the fugitive Ulrich, Dasker continued, and for his known human accomplices. A grainy security image from the glitching post flashed onto the screen. It was a clear shot of my mother smashing the mug into the agent's face, with me in the background looking suitably shocked. Our faces were circled in red. These 2 humans are considered armed and extremely dangerous. Any citizen providing information leading to their capture or elimination will be rewarded by a grateful empire. The galaxy, which had felt infinitely large, suddenly shrank to the size of our grungy cockpit. This wasn't Ulrich's problem anymore. It was ours. They hadn't just made us fugitives. They had put a target on my back. They had threatened her daughter. I watched a switch flip in my mother's eyes. The weary survivalist, the reluctant hero who had just wanted to be left alone, vanished. In her place was the stone-cold combat engineer, who had kept her squad alive against unlikely odds. The mercenary, who understood that the only way to end a threat is to eliminate it at the source. The mother bear whose cub had just been poked. Her expression became pure, unyielding ice. She turned off the broadcast, plunging the cockpit into silence. Then she looked directly at Ulrich. "Okay, Emperor," she said, her voice devoid of any sarcasm or fear. It was the sound of a weapon being cocked. "Where are we gonna find this son of a bitch?" Our destination, it turned out, was a place called Spire Station Kalis. It wasn't just some random orbital platform. It was a major communications hub, the central nerve center for a massive sector of the Imperial fleet. It was, in Ulrich's words, the perfect place to turn Dasker's greatest strength into his greatest weakness. "Dasker is a creature of military doctrine," Ulrich explained as he pulled up a holographic schematic of the station. "He believes in secure channels, encrypted communications, and the unshakable integrity of the Kaelian military network. He is using a high-level triple encrypted channel, originating from Kalis, to coordinate his fleet movements and instruct his conspirators. He believes it is untouchable." "So, we're gonna touch it," my mother finished, her eyes tracing the schematics. "We are going to hijack it," Ulrich corrected, a faint, dangerous smile playing on his lips. "The station's central comm spire has the power to broadcast on an emergency frequency that overrides all other channels. If we can gain access to the control room, we can splice into Dasker's secure feed and broadcast his treasonous orders to the entire Ascendancy. His own words will be his undoing. The admirals and captains who are still loyal but too afraid to act will see the truth." The plan was as simple as it was suicidally insane. We had to infiltrate one of the most secure military installations in the sector, fight our way to its core, and perform a live broadcast that would either save the Empire or get us atomized. "Right," my mother said, cracking her knuckles. "Just another day at the office." I looked from the Emperor with a plan to the combat engineer with the will to execute it. "Just so we're clear," I piped up, "my role in this is hacker in the chair, right? Safely on the ship, making sure the escape route is clear." My mother and Ulrich both looked at me. "No," they said in perfect, terrifying unison. "Well, crap." Infiltrating Spire Station Kalis felt like walking into the belly of a very neat, very shiny, very deadly beast. Kaelian patrols marched in perfect synchronization, their black armor gleaming under the stark white lights. But the three of us moved through the station's arteries like a ghost. We had become a perfect three-person machine, a seamless synthesis of order and chaos. Ulrich led the way, his fingers dancing over security consoles. His Imperial command codes, still valid in the system's deep architecture, were a master key. A laser grid that would have sliced us into bite-sized chunks dissolved into harmless light with a silent command from his datapad. He was the embodiment of order, using the system's own rules to break it. My mother was our eyes and ears. While Ulrich was focused on the digital world, her attention was on the physical one. "Heat signature from that vent," she whispered, pointing to an overhead grate. "Hidden patrol." Without breaking stride, she guided us down a dark maintenance corridor, her movements fluid and silent. A soldier's pragmatism honed by years of avoiding ambushes. She was disciplined chaos, improvisation guided by instinct. And me, I was pure, unadulterated chaos. My datapad was my weapon. As a patrol rounded a corner ahead of us, their path about to intersect with ours, I pushed a simple script I'd written to their comms frequency. Suddenly, their helmet speakers, normally reserved for crisp military orders, filled with an aggressive, repeating audio advertisement for a particularly pungent local fungal cream. "Tired of irritating spore rash?" the cheerful voice boomed in their ears. "Try Klaxar's ointment, available at all sector apothecaries." The four Kaelian soldiers stopped dead in their tracks, staring at each other in baffled confusion. One of them slapped the side of his helmet, as if trying to dislodge a bug. As they fumbled with their chattering, malfunctioning comms, we slipped past them in the shadows, silent as a bad memory. We flowed through the station like that. Ulrich parting the digital sea, my mother navigating the treacherous physical currents, and me throwing wrenches of pure electronic absurdity into the gears of the Imperial war machine. We reached the base of the central communication spire. The control room was at the very top, a high-tech sanctuary accessible only by a single, heavily guarded grav lift. As we stepped into the lift and the doors hissed shut, a sudden, jarring lurch told us this was the end of the line for stealth. The lift stopped. The lights went red, and a synthesized voice announced, "Security protocol initiated. Intruder alert." Dasker had anticipated us. The doors opened not to an empty corridor, but to the Spire's control room itself. It was already occupied. 6 figures in the same matte black armor as the thugs from the Café dropped from the magnetic clamps on the ceiling, landing in silent, predatory circle around us. Dasker's elite assassins, the Obsidian Guard. The firefight was instantaneous, brutal, and close quarters. Ulrich moved like a phantom, a humming blade of blue energy erupting from a device on his wrist. He became a whirlwind of deadly strikes, deflecting blaster bolts and slashing through armor with the cold, efficient art of a duelist trained since birth. My mother was his opposite, a storm of scavenged ferocity. She fought with a plasma pistol and her bare hands. A blade strike meant to decapitate her hissed through the air where her head had been. Before the assassin could recover, she was inside his guard, the hot barrel of her pistol jamming into the unarmored joint of his knee. A single pull of the trigger ended his charge in a shriek of agony. As another charged her, she kicked a loose floor panel up into his chest, staggering him, then used his momentum to throw him headfirst into a sparking power conduit. It was a deadly dance. I scrambled for cover behind a massive server bank, my heart hammering against my ribs. My datapad was my only weapon. Come on, I muttered, my fingers flying across the holographic interface, slamming against Kalian military firewalls. Access denied. Access denied. Ulrich was magnificent, but he was outnumbered. 2 assassins focused their fire on him, their plasma bolts hammering against his personal energy shield. It flared, sputtered, and failed with a shower of sparks. He was exposed. An assassin raised his energy blade for the final, killing blow. My mother was across the room, locked in combat with the other 2. She wouldn't make it in time. "Gotcha!" I yelled. My frantic hacking finally broke through a subsystem protocol. I didn't bypass the security. I triggered it. The command I sent wasn't subtle. With a deafening hiss, the room's emergency fire suppression system activated. Thick, white, flame-retardant foam erupted from nozzles in the ceiling, instantly coating everything. The assassin lunged, but his killing blow was suddenly interrupted by a high-pressure blast of foam directly to his face. He staggered back, roaring in surprise and rage, momentarily blinded. That was all the opening Ulrich needed. His blue blade flashed once in the chaotic, foam-filled room. The last assassin fell. The control room went silent, the quiet broken only by the drip of foam from the consoles and our own ragged, desperate breaths. Sparks rained down from a damaged ceiling panel. The air was thick with the scent of superheated ceramic and victory. Ulrich stood in the center of the carnage, his energy blade deactivating with a soft hiss. He looked at my mother, and in his silver eyes, there was no emperor. There was no regal commander, no ruler of 10,000 worlds. There was only a man, filled with an awe so profound that it was almost painful. He looked at her, as if he were seeing the sunrise for the very first time. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the grime from her cheeks. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, tentative kiss. It was a desperate, triumphant claiming. It was 500 years of loneliness and a duty melting away into a single fiery moment. It was the gratitude of a king and the adoration of a man. It was a confession and a coronation all at once. My mother's hands went to his shoulders, pulling him closer. They broke apart, foreheads resting against each other, breathing the same air. The galaxy, the coup, the dead assassins on the floor, all of it faded away, leaving just the two of them in the heart of the storm. And then, without breaking eye contact with Ulrich, my mother reached out with her free hand and slammed it down on the main activation panel of the broadcast array. A connection was made. Dasker's voice, cold, confident, and utterly treasonous, suddenly boomed out from the room's speakers and across the Galactic emergency network. The Loyalist fleets at Orion will be ambushed by the 3rd and the 5th battalions, Dasker was saying, his voice clear as a bell for trillions to hear. Admiral Zorgan is to be taken into custody and executed for his treason. The Emperor's weakness has been a cancer on this ascendancy for far too long. Today, we carve it out. The coup, broadcast in its own architect's words, began to eat itself alive. On the bridge of the Imperial star vessel Heliopause, Ulrich's reclaimed flagship, the stars were a serene, silent canvas. The chaos was over. Dasker was in custody, his fleet in disarray, Loyalist ships having turned on the traitors the moment his broadcast had echoed through their comms. The Empire was safe. Ulrich stood beside my mother at the massive viewport, watching the star-dusted gulf. He had changed. The weary weight was still there, but it was tempered now by something new. He was dressed again in the formal, severe robes of his office, but they didn't seem to fit him quite as well as they used to. He turned to her, his expression sincere, his silver eyes soft. I owe you my life, my empire, he said, his voice quiet but resonant with power. Ask for anything. A world to call your own, a fleet to command, a title, wealth, power. It's yours. Name it. It was his final, grand, orderly gesture of courtship, the offer of a king. My mother just smirked, a genuine, tired, beautiful smile that finally truly reached her eyes. She shook her head slowly. I don't want your galaxy, Ulrich, she said softly. It seems like a lot of paperwork. She gently poked him in his perfectly sculpted, royally armored chest. I just want you. A mischievous glint appeared in her eyes. But you'd better keep up. He smiled. A real smile, not the faint, weary thing I'd seen before, but a wide, brilliant, breathtaking grin that transformed his entire face. It was the smile of a man who had been freed, not from a coup, but from a prison of his own making. I will consider that an imperial directive, he said. A few weeks later, on the Kalian throne world of Kalis, things were different. The air in the imperial palace, once thick with stifling tradition and silent judgment, now had a faint, chaotic hum to it. A human hum. Emperor Ulrich still ruled, but he did so with a new perspective. He now had a special advisor on applied chaos, my mother's unofficial title, which she hated, and he found endlessly amusing. I witnessed one of their first council meetings. A stuffy, old admiral with a face like a collapsed star proposed a rigid 10-year plan for fleet deployment. My mother, sitting in a chair she'd had brought in because the Kalian ones were, quote, designed by someone who hated spines, bluntly pointed out that his 10-year plan wouldn't survive 10 minutes of first contact with an actual crisis. The admiral nearly had an aneurysm, but Ulrich listened, and the plan was revised to be more flexible, more adaptable, more human. As for me, I had, of course, discovered that the palace's ancient, venerable announcement system was connected to a network with security protocols that were frankly insulting. Now, at random, inconvenient intervals, The hollowed halls would echo with the searing guitar riffs of Terran classic rock. I was also in the middle of teaching the captain of the Royal Guard the finer points of bluffing and five-card stud. He was a surprisingly slow learner. From the balcony of my new, ridiculously opulent room, a room bigger than our entire condo on Port Ambit, I looked down into the palace gardens. The plants were all perfectly geometric, the paths laid out with mathematical perfection. But in the middle of it all were my mother and Ulrich. They were arguing playfully, him gesturing with regal grace, her poking him in the ribs and laughing. He was finally learning to loosen his tie, metaphorically speaking. My mother was dating the Galactic Emperor, all right. And from the looks of it, he was finally learning how to live.